understand we've all done lots of inductions, but it's important that you listen because work processes change, and this might save your fingers or save an eye or save your job or even save your life. So it goes for about 20 minutes and I encourage you to pay attention. So what's the reasoning behind delivering this induction? As I'm sure lots of us have done lots of inductions previously. Negri offers an induction for several reasons. It's fundamentally important that everybody working on site understands what the safety, quality and environmental requirements are on the project they are working on, as well as the workplace expectations and what workplace behaviours are deemed acceptable. Those benchmarks and workplace expectations include how we undertake all work safely, how we deliver work to a quality, and how we'll work collectively to deliver a project to a client's specifications. This induction will outline a number of non-negotiable workplace conditions which all workers are required to apply at all times on any Negri project in how they especially treat their fellow workers, apply safety to all tasks, and deliver work to an acceptable quality and on time. So the objectives are for workers to demonstrate an understanding of their workplace safety responsibilities and to work within the requirements that may present while on site. Workers also have to successfully answer a very short questionnaire at the end of this presentation to show that you understand what your accountabilities and responsibilities are, and finally to produce evidence on the devices having completed the induction when requested on site. Negri work under several key pieces of legislation, the main ones being the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Act of 2004 and the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2017. There are a number of other acts and regulations, as well as compliance and guidance notes, as well as codes of practices and Australian standards that Negri and the project work under. All legislation and compliance codes are available on site on request. A key element within the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Act of 2004 is the notion of duty of care. This means that as an employer we have an obligation to our workers to provide a workplace that is free from any reasonably foreseeable risks. Negri must meet our duty of care by providing, amongst other things, safe systems of work, by ensuring that all plant and equipment is safe to use, ensuring that all reasonably foreseeable risks are identified, assessed and controlled, providing training, instruction and supervision to ensure that all works being done can be done so in a safe manner. This induction forms part of that training requirement. Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, workers also have a duty of care obligations. These are predominantly that you will undertake all reasonable actions to ensure your own safety as well as the safety of other workers. Only work within your competencies and do not do anything that you're not either trained or experienced in doing. Follow all reasonable instructions as issued by Negri and wear and use all PPE as intended and as directed. If you feel what we ask of you during this induction you're unable to comply with, then please do the right thing and don't come to work with us, because we won't lessen our safety requirements for anyone. So who is Negri? Negri is a proud civil construction company that is approaching 100 years of delivering construction projects in and around Melbourne. Negri started in 1928, and even though there's been a few changes, the core of the business remains the same. We'd like to believe that the longevity of the business is due to our reputation with clients, completing projects safely and on time to a budget and to a very high quality standard that our clients are proud of what we deliver for them. But Negri is more than just a business name. Negri is made up from all the people who turn up and work for the business in any capacity every day. And Negri is as successful as the least safe person on a site. Negri will only be as successful as the person working on site who cares the least about the quality of work they deliver. Negri have a lot of workplace policies around safety, environmental, quality, bullying, fair work, issue resolution and a few others. These are displayed in the crib rooms at the project you're working at, and these policies reinforce those standards and expectations we're about to cover. We're going to spend the next few minutes looking at some of the high risk work that affects most Negri projects. The common high-risk construction work activities that generally happen on Negri sites involve the potential to fall greater than 2 metres, trenches or shafts deeper than 1.5 metres, confined spaces, work near pressurised gas, works near electrical installations, work near moving plant, the disturbance of asbestos, work near contaminated or flammable atmospheres, especially regarding silica dust, and work near active traffic corridors including rail and roads. It's important to realise that all high-risk work activities on a construction site must have a safe work method statement prepared for that task to work under. Safe work method statements must only capture any of the high-risk works as we've defined. Safe work method statements must then nominate what specific controls are to be applied to manage or mitigate the risks associated with those high risks under that construction work. SWIMS must also determine who specifically is deemed responsible for ensuring that the nominated controls are in place prior to works commencing. For the SWIMS to remain compliant, no other hazards or risks that are not defined as high-risk construction work are to be captured on the SWIMS document. Works should not commence until a safe work method statement has been developed and reviewed. For all other hazards and risks, these need to be managed through other means. Workers that are undertaking tasks under a SWIMS must have an opportunity to read and review that SWIMS prior to the works. All SWIMS must be reviewed monthly as a minimum and re-signed, including all subcontractor SWIMS. Let's spend some time looking at some of the known high-risk work activities that we routinely are exposed to on our projects, and the steps we need to take to sufficiently manage the risks they bring. By design, Negri is a civil construction company. A significant majority of our works involves construction of either new roads or replacing and resurfacing existing roads. As a result, we constantly find ourselves interacting with members of the public in vehicles as they transit through and around our work sites. The risks around having this shared workspace with members of the public that we do not directly control or manage introduces a number of critical risks in our workplace that can be difficult to apply. To try and manage those risks, we look to separate or segregate our workplace from these members of public wherever practicable, using a number of delineators or barriers. From TL4 or TL3 type steel and concrete barriers to TL2 type water barriers, or in some instances, bollards and stop-go traffic controllers in parallel with truck-mounted attenuators. Each workplace risk will need to be managed by using the most practicable control. When working within these workspaces, workers must always maintain a high degree of vigilance around what members of the public may be doing. Where the barriers are installed, workers are not to work within any defined deflection zones. Deflection zones are dictated by the speed of the traffic passing the barriers and the types of barriers that are in use. Deflection zones will be discussed in pre-starts and should be marked when on site. No tools or materials are permitted to be placed or stored inside this deflection area, and nothing is to be leant up against the barriers. Under no circumstances are workers permitted to ever jump over traffic barriers. Proper pedestrian access points to allow workers to safely cross any active traffic lanes are to be designated within the work zones, and it is that point only where workers will cross roads to enter the work site. On some occasions, our work involves entering into confined spaces, and there are a number of requirements around what needs to be done prior to that work being attempted. On all projects, Negri will ensure that all confined spaces are identified early, as that will trigger certain safety requirements for works to be done safely, such as all workers entering the confined space must be able to demonstrate they are familiar with the hazards and risks that working in that confined space may introduce. There must be a permit to work system in place where all workers entering that confined space must sign in and out of, and there must be a dedicated confined space sentry who is able to maintain continuous communication with the people working in the confined space and who oversees the safety of those people. No worker is to be requested or is to work in a confined space where those conditions are not met, and where there is any doubt, workers are to follow the Negri issue resolution procedure before that work is started. Possibly one of the biggest risks for any civil construction company, especially during excavation activities, is contacting an underground service that is either unknown, hidden, or missed during any utility mapping. These can include high pressure gas lines, high voltage electrical lines, drainage and sewage pipes, and a number of other services people have buried over time. On all projects, Negri will review all dial before you dig documents, as well as liaise with utility owners and then physically locate any services that run into, through, or out of our working areas, using either non-destructive digging or service sweeping. The other risks for workers in plant is contacting overhead services, mainly communications cables or electrical wires. To best mitigate those risks, any number of safety controls will be put in place, from proximity warning devices through to ticketed and experienced spotters being used whenever Negri is digging, or wherever we are using plant or equipment that can access inside overhead no-go zones, or where there is any risk that both may be present. Nearly every Negri project encounters the need to trench to a depth deeper than 1.5 metres. Trenches that deep introduce risks around potential for collapse, the potential for oxygen deficiency, and a potential for especially flammable vapours and gases that are heavier than air to accumulate. To manage those risks, any excavation with a vertical wall greater than 1 metre in height must either be benched, be battered, have a geotechnical engineer confirm that the trench walls are able to sustain themselves without collapsing and it's an acceptable risk, or shields and soldiers are to be used to secure all trench walls. The Negri project team will constantly reassess the works and put in place suitable controls where we are working in trenches deeper than 1 metre. To deliver on our works, generally we need to use big, cumbersome, heavy items of plant and vehicles that have very large blind spots. And while technology is improving to allow operators to be made aware by audible alarm when somebody enters within a no-go zone, there are still instances where machines are blind to worker movements. All projects must ensure there are suitable pedestrian access points for workers in place to get around the work sites. And unless a person is working with an item of plant or a machine, no worker is permitted within 5 metres of that operating plant, unless the operator is contacted, made aware of their presence, gives permission, and the plant stops work. All light vehicles are to be parked a minimum of 20 metres away from any operating plant, and all required PPE, especially high-vis in good condition, is to be worn whenever workers are on the ground on a Negri project around operating plant. Possibly one of the more prevalent risks nowadays within the works that we do is when working around and with concrete. It is now accepted that fine ground concrete powder and dust can cause significant chronic illnesses such as silicosis, and all efforts must be made to prevent or reduce dust from being produced. From concrete dust produced when bags are placed into concrete mixers, to using any type of cutting or grinding equipment on any product containing concrete or cement, and when cutting asphalt or concrete products. As a minimum, when extraction ventilation to remove dust there and then isn't practicable, then dust must be suppressed by using water. Any worker within that area must be provided and wear a P2 dust mask at a minimum. So what about all the other hazards and risks? As there's still a requirement to capture those, as they may still impact how work can be completed safely. Those risks that still sit outside of construction activities that are deemed high risk can be managed either through something like a job hazard analysis, take fives, stops, or pre-task meetings to discuss how the works are to be done. We need to make sure that we are still aware of all the risks and hazards our workplace has. All projects will have PPE requirements that we will discuss further. PPE is the least preferred method of controlling those hazards and risks and trying to protect workers. For PPE to be effective, it must be worn correctly, and it must be worn as intended. Any workers not found wearing the correct PPE for that work will be asked why. Negri have minimum requirements on all jobs when wearing PPE. The project is a hard hat site, and hard hats must be worn at all times where they can be. You must be able to clearly demonstrate in a risk assessment where they're unable to be worn and what other controls would be put in place. Safety glasses must be worn while working on site, and compliant VicRoads high-vis clothing is also to be worn while working on site. Gloves need to be worn whenever material handling or using certain hand tools, or as outlined under a risk assessment, as wearing gloves will significantly reduce the risk of workers sustaining serious hand injuries. All workers must wear long sleeve shirts, button down and long pants at all times to protect against UV as well as scratches and knocks. Tracksuit pants are not acceptable as they don't provide the same level of protection. All workers must wear steel cap lace-up boots, again unless it can be demonstrated why they cannot or should not be worn. We need to be mindful that hazards and risks can be found in the various stages of the work that we do. There are some hazards that are obvious. There are hazards that are hidden that don't present as a risk until we commence work. And there's hazards that are developing as we continue on with our work. While certain risks in our work cannot be entertained, we do accept that in the work we do, there are still risks each day we must face. We will look to utilise the skills and experience of our workers so that we understand those risks and have those risks reduced to a level where we all feel it is acceptable. All works on a Negri site need to have some form of written risk assessment undertaken. Negri believe your best protection from hazards and risks is you making smart decisions, utilising your skills and applying your experience to make safer decisions first on all jobs you are doing, or asking any questions where there are gaps in that knowledge or experience. Most industries assess risk controls against a process that's called the hierarchy of control. We use this process to better ensure that risks are assessed in a formal manner and then apply controls that get risks down to an acceptable level. We should look to aim to get into the blue-green sections in this slide, as it should provide safer workplaces. As we drop into the orange and the red sections, we accept that the risk remains and we've settled for a procedural approach and or applying some PPE to try and protect the worker from the risk. Negri will always aim as high up the hierarchy of control as is practicable to implement a control. So bringing all those risk management programs together is a process called the HIRAC principle, which stands for Hazard Identification, Risk Assessment and Control. Because we need to try and identify those hazards on our sites so that workers are able to determine just what risks are likely to be encountered, and then what problems those risks may introduce. We use a standardised risk assessment process which will allow workers to prioritise those risks, that if when encountered will either carry a very high likelihood or a high consequence, and we do this by using the risk score matrix. When this matrix is used, those risk assessments are to be documented. We will now look at a number of what we call absolutes that exist within the civil construction industry that Negri apply. All persons working on a Negri site must have undertaken some form of a Negri induction, attend the project's daily pre-start meeting, have a construction white card if doing construction work, report any and all incidents and hazards to a Negri manager, and immediately stop a worker that is working in a manner where they could hurt themselves or hurt others, amongst other absolutes. As all workplaces do, we hold a number of expectations for our workers on sites. All violations and breaches of our workplace expectations will be met with some form of disciplinary action. Some of the expectations that we have that may result in disciplinary action are any fighting on site, stealing of any property from either a fellow worker, a client, or from Negri, any sexual harassment or racial vilification. Using Negri's provided hardware such as laptops or tablets inappropriately to download sexually implicit material. Or attending work under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. Or anything else that goes against a reasonably held standard for a modern workplace. Negri have a simple issue resolution process. This reflects what is required under the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Act. For any safety issues, Negri will engage with workers to look for resolutions. Or as a last resort, a WorkSafe officer may make a decision or give a direction on the best means to manage that safety issue. The issue resolution process is displayed at all Negri workplaces.
I first became involved with AUOK when I went through my own challenges. I was on Struggle Street back in 2012 and I had a mate actually call me out on the stuff that he was noticing, the changes in my life. And that conversation led me to get the help that I need and the reason why I'm here today. One of the things that I wish I'd known earlier on in regards to mental health and being a tradie was that it's okay not to be okay, because sometimes life happens.
Mental health and well-being. The project is looking for all workers to manage their own well-being, and especially their fatigue management while working on the project. The project will experience a number of flexible shifts, both night works and day works, where worker well-being must be suitably managed. The project is also asking workers to ensure their workmates come to work in a fit and mentally proper state, or to raise any safety concerns with their supervisor to ensure that all workers present on site and are safe to work. Inclusiveness and social procurement. All workers on Negri's projects rightly expect a workplace that is free from any form of harassment or bullying based on who that person is. Negri hold as an absolute that all workers are to be treated with respect and entitled to attend work to do their jobs without the threat of bullying, harassment and intimidation for any reason, especially where a person may be discriminated or picked on due to their sex, social standing, marital status, religion or their gender identity. Where this is established as occurring, those responsible risk disciplinary action up to being terminated from employment or being removed from a Negri site. Negri is a signatory and committed to the Victorian State Government's Gender Equality Action Plan, and we seek to increase the safe and meaningful participation of women in senior positions throughout the project's life cycle, wherever possible. Environmental. Negri committed to providing as much protection to our workplace environmentally as possible. No dirty water is to be discharged from the site without first being treated and tested to ensure it will not cause any issues when it enters drains or other water courses. All drains are to be adequately protected from silt and sediment entering stormwater drains unchecked. This may be achieved using silt fencing, drain pads or coil logs, or sediment tanks, or a combination of all of these. After major rain events, the site is to be inspected by the Negri supervision to ensure that all environmental controls remain intact. Trees within the construction zone that are not to be removed are required to have tree protection zones installed and be clearly identifiable. Tree protection zones must be in line with the specifications outlined in the Environmental Management Plan. Tree protection zones are no-go zones under all circumstances, and permission from the Negri supervisor must be received before any works inside those tree protection zones are done. Negri hold ISO 9001 quality accreditation. This should allow us to build the project to at least a minimum quality, with a number of requirements throughout the project's life cycles that are required to be met. These are captured on ITPs, FICs and as-builts, which are generally done by site engineers or specialists. But it relies on all of us having a level of pride in what we build when given the correct materials and tools, as well as notifying management when something either looks wrong or may have gone wrong. The quality of what we leave is a legacy to who we are. We always look to set up our projects to go right. But what happens in the event something goes very wrong? And more often than not, it's not a workplace incident that triggers a major response. In the event there is a significant incident that requires the site to be evacuated, we will be using UHF, air horns and mobile phones to raise the alarm amongst workers. The project will have a Negri nominated emergency controller and Negri nominated emergency warden, who will manage the incident from a communications and response point of view. Workers are to make safe any equipment where able to do so and make their way to the primary muster point located at the site compound. Please answer a small questionnaire around what we have discussed throughout this induction. A pass score of 80% is required to deem that you are competent and safe to work on Negri projects.